So you may be wondering, how do you know if you need a clutch or not? And if you've got one of these auto clutch three-wheelers, there's two clutches in this machine. There's a takeoff clutch or a centrifugal clutch, and that's going to get you out of the hole. If your machine, when you put it in gear, if it doesn't lunge forward just a little bit, and when you give it gas, if the RPMs come up but you don't really go, you need a centrifugal clutch, and you can find those sometimes on eBay. Those are really hard to find, but good news is they hardly ever wear out. 99% of these machines I've dealt with have always, the centrifugals pretty much always worked. I've had one machine that didn't. It was a very early 1980 185 No S, the orange one. It was really cool. I should have kept it, but I didn't. Primary clutch is where it goes in between all your gear shifting, and it slips the most, it wears the most, and that is the one that wears out the most often. Buy it as a kit. There's a link in the description if you need it. They're not that expensive. You're going to need two specialty tools. You're going to need a 4-prong socket, and you're going to need a 30mm socket to get this job started and completed. Some Honda bond and some basic hand tools. It's really not that difficult. Tip the machine up on its left side. That will retain the majority of the oil in the machine. The higher you can get that right wheel in the air, the better. Just be careful that the machine doesn't tip over. But this is also a good time to go ahead and service your machine. Go ahead and change the oil in it. So it's just basic maintenance. You'll probably only have to do this once in the lifetime of you owning the machine. This is something that probably only has to be done about every 5 years or so, depending on how hard you ride your machine and how often you ride your machine. All right, welcome back to the shop. We're about knee deep into a clutch here, and I've done clutch videos before. They've done well. A lot of people reference them, and that's great. That's what they're for. I thought we'd kind of do a refresher here. This is a 200X. This is 84, I believe. 83 to 85 is the same, but this is not a 200X engine. This engine is actually a 200E. Automatic or electric start, auto clutch, high-low range out of a Big Red, out of an 82, 83 Big Red. So that may sound a little confusing, but these early three-wheelers, I think that covers all of them. I think there's 7. These motors share so much of the same parts and design. And so what I'm going to show you today is we're going to replace a clutch, and we're going to replace the clutch. We'll talk about the differences in the clutches. This machine actually has 2 clutches. I like to consider one a takeoff clutch, and then the other is more of a primary clutch, you're running on clutch. That might not be the technical definitions or names for these, but it makes it easy for me to understand what role they play and how they engage and disengage, and I think it might help you understand it a little bit better too. All right, before we get carried away too far, there's going to be a couple of specialty tools. Unfortunately, you just got to have them. It's one of those necessary evils. So if you got a couple buddies that's got these, maybe y'all can pull together. I'll put some links down in the description. They're not that expensive. I think probably $30 or $40 to get you everything you need to know, or every tool that you need for the job. The first is going to be this 4-way driver. It's 2 different sizes, which works out really well for 2 different models of machines. You'll find one of the primary bolts that hold the actual clutch pack together requires this to get it off, and then your main takeoff clutch requires a 30mm socket to get that off. An electric impact will work, or even if you have an extra pair of hands, you can get a buddy to help you kind of hold the clutch together, and then you can take it off. Now, the 30mm bolt is reverse thread, so when you go to take it off, you'll actually, be righty-loosey in that instance instead of righty-tighty. So here on the right side of the machine, we've got our clutch cover. I've just got one bolt in it holding it up. I tore it apart, and I just knew I had a clutch for this machine. I was going to do a quick clutch for it and go on about my day. And I was sorely mistaken. I did not have a clutch for it, and I found that out after I tore it apart. So I just got a bolt in here kind of holding everything together. You're going to take a series of bolts off around the cover. Get over here. There you go. There you go. You're going to take the series of bolts all the way off, all the way around. You are going to see me use an impact today. I use an impact to take them all out. I'll use an impact to run them in just snug, not tight. I'll go back by hand and I'll tighten everything up. Now that's all the preliminary stuff. So let's get to the good part. Like I said, this machine has been down for about a week now. As you see, everything's settled. This is a good opportunity to inspect and clean. I mean, half of mechanics, I think, is just cleaning everything. So if you don't like cleaning stuff, mechanics might not be the job for you in the future. Check your bearings. You know, they should spin freely. They shouldn't have any rust on them. Clean out your cases. Just get all the old gunk out. It's a great opportunity. It's one of those jobs they say, you know, while you're in there, go ahead and do X, Y, and Z. Now yours is going to look a little different. We're going to kind of do this video a little backwards. You're going to see me build this out instead of tear it down and build it out. But what we're going to do is talk about why we're doing it and what the pieces are, what they do, and what you need to look for when you tear into your machine. So let's look at our clutches, because that's where we are. We are ready to build this machine out. Here we've had our clutches soaking. Now I soak these in motor oil. I know in videos past I've told you to soak them in transmission fluid. Here's my line of thought on that, and it's just kind of changed over the years. I don't see a lot of reason in soaking them in transmission fluid if they're going to live their life in motor oil. I mean, I just don't get it. First off, what you're going to want to do is, this is your clutch basket, and so it just slides in here. Everything should have a nice smooth feel to it. If anything is bound up or feels tight, you need to check it out, because it shouldn't. Everything should be real smooth. Now on your clutch baskets, things you want to look for is right on the inside edge of these. What will happen is a clutch will ride, excuse me, a clutch friction plate will ride inside here. And every time it engages and disengages, it tries to turn as the torque is applied to it. And so what happens is little grooves, little notches get put right in the very edge of this basket all the way around. And so what happens is, if you get a clutch that sticks, one of the culprits is that those ridges that are put in here by the clutches trying to turn, is a clutch will get hung up in one of those ridges and can't move in and out. The whole purpose of this clutch is when pressure is applied to it, it has to be able to float inside. There's a series of 4 springs that keep constant tension on it. But when these little grooves get bad enough that these plates, these friction discs, they get hung up, then a clutch can hang at a stick and then it won't let go, or you won't be able to disengage it in order to put the machine into gear. So this is the old clutch. This is, we took it out of here. Everything looks good on this basket. If we look real close, you can just see a little indentation all the way around, and that's where those clutches plates actually wear, and they leave a little groove. Now, a couple of things you can do. You can take a file. If these are so bad that you can catch a fingernail on them, you can take a file and flatten them out. It's a little tedious, but that will get you by. The better option would be, of course, to replace the clutch basket. But, you know, in the thought of getting by, you can just actually file those down till they're smooth. And you can put it back in there. Just don't be careful not to file too much, because then your clutch disc will be able to wrap and move around and it'll make a lot of noise. So just lightly, just to smooth out those imperfections. So our clutch basket is good. There's a washer in here. It's a shim. It's very specific to this placement. Be sure and keep all that together. On the back side, we've got a nice big gear. Make sure you don't have any wear, any rubbing or anything like that. And we'll put it back in its location like so. And make sure it bottoms out. Okay. Not the cleanest job, so be sure and get lots of paper towels handy. The first stage, what we're going to do, as you see, that we have this inner basket, or this inner shell here, and so you just want to make sure it's clean. That's going to act as our first friction point for our clutch. We're going to put it back in. Remember to center up on that washer. Keep that washer, that shim right there. It's very important. So this being our backside, our first order of operation is going to be, we're going to put our first new clutch plate in. Friction disc is what it would be called. Now, I took these out. This is one that come out. I'm going to be honest with you. I was pretty shocked. This machine was slipping really bad. And I was really surprised that this clutch looks this good. You know, it's not much worse than what we're putting in here, which is brand new. I think if you look at the total parts as a whole, someone's come in here and replaced a clutch. And what they did is they replaced just the friction disc. They did not replace the steels. These are the steels, and they ride in between each friction disc. And as you see, the imprint of the actual friction disc are on the steels. That really should have been cleaned off, and there's a razor edge on here. These are the original steels to the machine, and they are sharp. So I think what someone did is they put a clutch in it, and when they did, they only did half a job. So here's where that while you're in here kind of thing takes place. They were replacing just the friction disc. They didn't replace the steels. That compromised the overall functionality of the clutch. These are probably the original springs. We will compare these to the replacement springs when we get to that part, but I will promise you these are going to be shorter and more than likely a lot softer just from age and wear. So that being said, we'll get back to our installation here. We've got steels, we've got new steels and new clutch plates. And guys, these kits are not expensive, but it's friction disc, then steel, then friction disc, then steel, so on and so on. Now, as you see, the clutch plates actually have the little fingers that fit in here. These friction discs do not. Excuse me, these steels do not. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to line up each one of these because they're splined on the inside. It's a little awkward to do this one-handed here. Apparently it's awkward to do it two-handed too. There we go. All right, and that's all there is to it. Now you can put this oil back in your machine. It's brand new oil. We would just let our discs soak in it. But just you do want to make sure that there's no loose fibers or any debris, they say, comes off of these into this oil. Otherwise it's clean new oil. More paper towels. All right, so now we've got our friction disc and our new steels in place. Now we want to build out the rest of the clutch. And so what we have is we have our secondary half, or our outer part of the shell, and it looks like this. And as you see, it's got these little notches all the way around. It's splined, if you will. And so what I'll do, just to kind of speed things up, is I'll take a screwdriver, and these notches here align with the notches on the inside of the disc, or excuse me, the inside of the clutch. And I'll just take a screwdriver and I'll just line up the little teeth of the steels and the clutches. And I just line them up like that. And then once those are aligned, then they will align with this outer part of the clutch. All right, and to make sure that you've got everything aligned properly, you should be able to take your entire clutch pack, even the furthest back and friction disc, grab the entire assembly, and you should be able to move it in and out freely. If you've done that, then you've got all the discs correctly aligned and ready to move on to the next step. Now our next step is we've got a washer here. It's actually, if you look really close, it says words. It says outside, meaning you should be able to read that. It should be on the outside. So it's actually got kind of a bevel to it. And so that being able to read to the outside, we're going to put it in first. This was the special nut we were talking about, and this is the special tool that fits it. And as you see, that's how it indexes. Now, there's a video out there where a guy takes a flathead screwdriver and jabs around it like that with a hammer. I think this is around $17. Get it. It's not that expensive to get the right tool. So we're going to go ahead and install that. It has also got a bevel to it, and the bevel goes to the outside. The flat side goes against this flat washer. Righty-tighty on this one. Now this is a 1/2-inch drive, and so is this large 30. I forgot I have this electric impact. I picked it up at a yard sale, believe it or not. And you don't have to wait for the compressor to build up. They're pretty handy. I know they're a little obsolete, you know, with electric tools as strong as they are, but pretty handy. I like it. Yeah, this is the shortest extension I could find. So I'm going to work from this from outside. Now, this is going to be one of them situations where I say, do as I recommend, not as I do. I recommend you getting a tool and holding this. All right. And that pretty much takes care of the actual clutch pack. Be sure once you get your bolt tight that your clutch plates are still loose and free. Nothing's in a bind, nothing's jammed up. All right, now what we're going to want to do is we're going to apply pressure to those clutches. And what keeps that clutch pack together and to work as a team of clutches instead of individual clutches are these 4 springs. It doesn't matter, they're non-directional which way you put them on. So then what we're going to end up with, we're going to have this plunger and a bearing in this little cover. And what this is going to do, this is actually going to ride here on the front, and this is also going to retain our 4 bolts. All right, so we got our 4 bolts started here. Now I'm going to run these in with the impact, but don't over tighten them, y'all. This is really thin aluminum. It's really old. You want to bring it down nice and square. Remember, this plunger sits in here. You don't want it to get in a cock or a bind. But I leave it in there so I can kind of keep an eye. If I can't move this for some reason, then I know that I've over tightened on one side or the other. I need to back up a little bit. And I'm just running these in slow until they bottom out. So again, you can hold your hand here. We're just tight. We don't want to over tighten. We don't want to break these. You just want them good and snug. About 2 ooga doogas. I can't tell you the torque spec. I don't know. But you can download the manual and you can read the torque spec for yourself. But ultimately, when you get done, this clutch pack is going to be tighter. Okay, it's all going to be one piece now because these springs are pushing against it. And we can still pull our plunger in and out. It's not in a bind. All right, sorry about that. I had to change batteries out. So we've got our main clutch pack installed, and so now we want to move out to our takeoff clutch, is what I like to call it. So this is what it looks like. We've got this shim on the outside. Be sure and catch that. These are not just washers. They're specific for specific places. I'm going to open this up because this is important. Inside here, you have, that's a spacer or a plate. We're going to clean all of this. In my right hand here, what you're going to see is it's a lot like a slipper clutch on a go-kart. It's a weird material. It's like a brake material, and it rides inside these grooves inside this band. And what happens is it's a centrifugal clutch. You can refer to this as a centrifugal clutch. On this machine, that is how the book refers to it. I call it a takeoff clutch. These are really hard to find. When you see one of these listed on eBay or somewhere and it's new, you want to grab it. If you can get the outer shell with it, that's good too, because they wear against one another. And the clutch lining wears into this groove and it causes it to slip. But when you're at idle, this is just like you see it here. It's all kind of brought together. And this spring, if you're familiar with go-karts, it works exactly the same way. When you rev it up, these little fingers, they kick out and they press tension against this outer shell or this outer drum and this clutch material, and that's what accelerates the bike. Once you get going, then this clutch pack takes over, and this does all your in between shifting, you know, 1 2 2 3 3 4 4 5 and so forth. But this is the way I think of it, is a takeoff clutch. It's also called a centrifugal clutch. It works off of RPM. If you've ever got on a machine that the RPM set, the idle set too high, and as soon as you put it into gear it wants to take off, that's because this clutch is trying to expand already at that RPM. So this is where your one-way bearing is. We've talked about this before. When you turn your machine off, if you hear kind of a whirr, kunk, your one-way is bad. Now is the perfect time to change it if you had one. I would highly recommend, if you were going to tear one down this far, go ahead and put a one-way bearing in here. It just makes life a whole lot simpler because you're already here. So the most difficult, and this took a little while even for me to figure out the first time, is on this clutch right here. As I pull it around, if you look really close, there's the indentation right here where my finger's at. But on the next solid area, there's not one, and then there's not one, and then there's not one, and then there is one. So there's only like 3 indentations on this outer shell, and you have to line this indentation up with this main shaft here that goes to the crank, like so. That's how close the tolerances are for this gear to slide past this clutch. If you watch closely, be careful, there's an O-ring right here on the end of this. So be careful, don't drag your centrifugal clutch across it. You'll tear it. So be real careful there, and just kind of place it over until it engages in its spline. Remember, these are all different pieces and they all kind of have to work together. As you see, because I took them apart, they're not aligned anymore. Okay, now I'm passing past this clutch pack because of where I put that indentation. Okay, I can go right past it and sink it all the way down until it's home. All right, so be sure that this gear goes all the way down and intersects back here and splines into the backside gear of that clutch. Now that one way comes into play. If you watch this, I can rotate it counterclockwise, no problem. But I can't rotate it clockwise without spinning the entire mechanism. Say without spinning the clutch or spinning the crank. If you look down there, you'll see me, I'm actually turning the crank of the engine, but I can spin it backwards, no problem. That's how you know that one way's working. All right, so next up we've got this retainer bolt. Remember, this is the 30mm we talked about. It is left-hand thread, it is reverse thread. Good and tight. All right, now you do want to stake this particular bolt if you're not familiar with that. That's where you can get a screwdriver or a punch. Would work better, but most people just have a screwdriver laying around. You'll see this is where it's been staked once before. It's got kind of a little blemish to it. What you want to do is just want to tap that down till it makes contact with the shaft itself, and that will give it more friction and stop it from trying to back off. It's actually an oil slinger, but what happens is the oil slings around here all the way around on the inside, and you see how it's black on these three sides here? It's not really supposed to be black. That is actually oil and buildup over the years. And it's every time you turn the machine off, a little bit of oil rests right there, and then it hardens up, and then it becomes that. And so if you look really close, you'll see some little metal filings in there, and more than likely it's clutch material. Don't panic about it. I mean, it just gathers up a little bit every time you ride your machine. I just take a pocket knife and kind of flick it out, get it out of the way. You can run it through a parts cleaner, but it's really caked on there, and you're gonna have to scrape it out. And I have seen these on machines really that probably had very, very poor maintenance. The oils the oil wasn't changed very well or very often. And I've seen these get so full of oil that built up that the whole thing is full. This one is not bad at all, but this is a great opportunity. We're changing the oil, we're putting in new clutches. Let's go ahead and get all this trash out of here. But this is the oil slinger, and it actually slings the oil up, but a little bit of oil sits there and collects every time you turn your machine off. And so be sure and clean that out before we put it back on. This is actually a little spring here, this little wafer spring, if you will, and it pushes against this and it keeps tension on it. So you want to make sure to get that perfectly centered. Remember, anything that spins, pretty much has to be perfect, has to be balanced. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to insert one of our bolts here, kind of help us line it up. There are 3 holes inside this centrifugal clutch, and so I'll get all 3 of these started by hand, of course. Remember that O-ring is on that shaft. You want to be careful not to lose that. It is metric, by the way, if you do. Again, I'm just using the drill to kind of speed things up. I'm not applying a lot of pressure here. I'm certainly not gunning it on. Come back, do it by hand. These are traditionally righty-tighty. And that's really it. We've replaced our, we've cleaned our oil slinger in our centrifugal clutch. We've cleaned and replaced our spring pack with our new springs, and we are ready to go. The only thing left now is to put the cover back on it. Now's a good, we got really lucky this gasket stayed together and didn't rip. That never happens. But I think that's because somebody put a clutch in here not too long ago. So we got really lucky there. You can use a Honda bond on this. That's what I would recommend if you don't go and decide to purchase a gasket. All right, right, that really is all there is to changing the clutch. I wish I had a one-way bearing to put in this to show y'all. It really just slides out of that outer shell and slides right back into it. Just be mindful of how you put it in. Always test it before you put your cover back on. Put your one-way in. You should be able to rotate that centrifugal clutch counterclockwise, but not be able to rotate it clockwise. If you find that that's the opposite of what you're seeing, you've put that bearing in the wrong way. So take it out, flip it around, put it back in. It's really it. I'm gonna wait till, and it's just because I have the time to do it, I'm gonna wait till morning, and we'll put oil in the machine, let that Honda bond, just a real light application all the way around the perimeter. That gasket was in place, so I was gonna reuse it. But I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to put oil in it tonight. I'm going to let that Honda bond have time to set up. If you're not familiar with Honda bond, you can pick it up on Amazon. There's a link in the description. It's a little more expensive than, say, an RTV. Yeah, I always get that backwards. Being dyslexic is awkward. But it's better, it's gray, it doesn't stick out. Be sure and wipe it down while it's wet. It's a lot easier to clean up when you first apply it than after it hardens up and gets everywhere. So clean up your mating surfaces, apply a little Honda bond, stick it together, let it sit overnight, and you will be in good shape. This machine, unfortunately, we're going to probably do a few more things to it real quickly, and then we're going to part ways with it. As you see what's sitting behind it, yeah, we got the LT back in the shop, and so I went through it last night. Was kind of messing around. We got brakes. Brakes are important, and so the left front wheel was hung up on that one. It was locked up on it, and I went ahead and took care of the rears too. So that chassis got brakes. We're going to put some swing arm bearings in it, and then I think we'll be ready to put the motor in it. That machine, we had spark. Everything was there. It just was blew up. That being said, things that are finished. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Appreciate you sticking around. We do things on wheels here. That's about all we do. We just finished up this Foreman. Pleased with it. It's just a real nice machine. We went ahead and decals. We got brand new OE tires on it. This machine should have had silver wheels, but it came in with black wheels, and I kind of liked them. Did a seat cover and some brake work on it, and just really tuned it up. The biggest thing we did, the biggest change to this, is we did the relay bypass for the angle sensor. It shifts. It just shifts. I mean, that's why we bought it. That's how we got that machine so cheap, is it wasn't shifting. And so I knew that kit was available, and even if it wasn't available, we could have went to a manual shift on it. Worst case scenario, I didn't want to do that, and we didn't have to. Those kits are really cheap. You can find those on eBay. But that one's ready to go. And 2 videos ago, we had the 250X. And so it's already out listed on Marketplace right now doing its thing. We're taking some calls on it. So yeah, we bring them in busted and down on their luck, and we build them back up, and we give them new life into them. We don't restore them, but we certainly revive them. So I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.